What's up, everybody? Well, I'm going to make another video between now and Halloween. No idea when I'll release, but I want to make at least one video in my orange Halloween shirt with my favorite pumpkin necklace fixed. And I did it in a very strange way. Well, not strange. Now the ghost one doesn't work. Because what happened was, it was just the battery. And rather than, I really wanted to go out and buy some new batteries. It's a CR1220. So think Colorado Rockies, December 20th. And that's the type of battery. It's just two little button batteries. 3 volt. And it's kind of a type of watch battery. I guess a bigger one. Well, so I got my pumpkin necklace to work again, and I prefer pumpkins, let's face it. Rather than blue ghost, I like the reddish orange pumpkins. So much more Halloween-y. Well, the thing I want to talk about, and I added some more hair to the little boy. I don't know what else to call him but Richie, R-I-T-C-H-I-E. Because at first I was going to call him Richie Rich. But I decided that I really don't like having so many dolls named Richard. Or some variation, you know, there's Ricky, there's 2 Rickies of sort, but I don't like the way that name was kind of overused. So I'm spelling it with a T. R-I-T-C-H-I-E. Because that's all I could think of was Richie Rich, that I wanted him to be. And I added more hair with yarn. Mod Podged onto his head. Because I just want him to have the cute little boy vibe, instead of the little girl who lost her hair vibe. So there shouldn't be any confusion that he's a little boy. And really there never should have been. But the other thing I want to show, I think I've shown this doll before, but I think if I could have had a doll like this, I'm not sure what she was supposed to be, but I think you were supposed to put clay on her head and give her a hairdo. Well, F that. And I just never could bring myself to get rid of the birthday wrapper. Because this is as close to a doll of me as you can get. She's got brown hair and brown eyes. And if you excuse the weird eye makeup, she is a short-haired female doll. And what I really wish is that from the beginning of time, that they could have made short-haired female dolls of every single age group. Instead of me having to do ridiculous things to destroy, so to speak, cheap dolls by flocking their hair and then not liking the result and getting rid of them later. But I wish that from the beginning of time, that for every single girl doll, not only would you have a male doll like a Ken, but you would have a short-haired lady doll. Because perhaps if I could have been presented something like that, instead of the Barbies with long blonde hair, growing up, perhaps I wouldn't have been so obsessed with Ken as I was. Because I just didn't find Barbie relatable. And I put her in one of the outfits that was freed up by the purchase of a dress, so that she gets to have pants and short hair in purple. So I just wish that in addition to male dolls, you could also have a short-haired variation on all females of all ages, all sizes. And so that the ones without breast, you know, like let's say there was a Kidcore doll, Kidcore Katie, with hair about like that. The little girls like that without breast Well, those could double as a boy doll. Just one cute little doll with short hair that you could imagine to be a boy or a girl, but probably a boy, since there are just so few girls. Just a simple, unisex looking kid with short hair like that 99% of people would just think of as a boy doll. But if you really wanted it to be a girl, it could be that too, without breast. So, the world would be a better place if little girls were not forced to accept long hair, long flowing hair, as just a part of your body. Just a part of your body, like your arms and your fingers and everything else. Your ears, your nose. Girls are just forced to think of long flowing hair, like all the dead cells that could grow down to where this necklace is. They're forced to see that as a part of their body. Whereas boys are forced to do the exact opposite, to have this little hair. And I think it's awesome. I like it. I like for boys to have buzz cuts. And that's what I'm aiming for when I remove the hair of a girl doll. I paint the scalp and I may add cut hair to it. That's what I'm aiming for. Is the look of a boy that has a buzz cut. Not a girl who had chemotherapy. But the world would just be a better place if natural looking short-haired dolls were more readily available. Dolls that you don't have to worry about having wads of tangled hair. I mean, those are nice, but it'd be nice to have some that are short-haired. And I know there's not much you can really do with short hair on a doll, because it's proportionally so much smaller and thicker than a human. But you could sculpt them, or, barring that, you could have wigs that you could glue on. You could have wigs, as I've stated before, in every color, made to fit every type of doll. If they can make little tiny batteries, which my dad won't allow me to buy new batteries because the necklace is actually cheaper than 2 batteries, than a 2-pack. And they don't like to always stock that kind of stuff at Walmart. They like you to buy it online. And by the time I would get it, we could be well into November and no longer needing it, for obvious reasons. So I decided to switcheroo and make the ghost non-functional in the pumpkin's flesh. So, one thing I want to address before this video becomes hours long is something that kind of caught my eye. I've been meaning to talk about, couldn't work it in. And it's this video that, for an obvious reason, it stands out. It's one of these religious nut men using his little boy like a puppet, basically. I hate it when they use their kids like a puppet, for their doctrine, their hate, their whatever. And then surprisingly, as the children go through puberty, and they finally can actually fit into these masculine ideals, or, whatever their dads are obsessed with. Men aren't manly enough. Men are more like girls these days. Well, ironically enough, when the kids actually get those physical changes that would cause it to make more sense for them to sing these things and say these things about the gays, with an actual man's voice. Ironically enough, that's when the child often rebels and wants to quit the church, wants to run away from home, and wants to do anything but follow in their dad's footsteps. And that's very odd to me. I've never fully understood that. You know, you would think that as they would get older and taller and manlier, that they would become more hateful and more bigoted, you know. And sometimes they do in various ways, often in ways that they don't think of. You know, they don't think they're bigoted, but they are. But ironically enough, it's when they could actually pass for a girl with short hair or a shaved head, and I might link it below, but surely as I do, the video could be deleted. It's this Tyson James and his son Toby James. Probably not their real name. I mean, I honestly doubt they would put their real name. You know, probably James is the middle name instead of the last name. Something like that. Or, you know, it could be that Toby is the dad, Tyson is the little boy, or vice versa. I don't really know. But it's just this man, you know, that makes Christian rap, which I think all rap is really crap. You know, they forgot the C. Because I feel like if it isn't country music, then it's probably no good. And I don't bother listening to that mess, is my philosophy. If it isn't country music, it probably isn't good music. Though there are exceptions in the world of pop music and folk music. But if it doesn't have emotion and, you know, it doesn't have a white sound about it, you know, if it sounds like something, you know, of a black style, then I probably won't listen to it. But, you know, so that might be racist and I don't really care. But Tyson James and Toby James, probably their middle name if I had to guess, they like to make videos, you know, that are bigoted and hateful about the gays. And he's using his little boy as a sort of a puppet, or he has been for years. I mean,
Pride stands for the land of the pigs, where they like to be trans and start playing with some kids. That bathroom's for girls, so we can't let you in. Steve, you ain't fooling no one. You're just a man in a wig. You're not gay, more like insane. Being gay is fun and dandy till you get AIDS. I just speak the truth and I don't care about gay rights. I can tell the left is mad cause my dad raised me right. You think you a woman cause you rockin' a stiletto? Don't make me get my airsoft, I'm knocking off a pedo. All y'all gonna be burning like the rich man. You are not a woman, just a dude with some implants.
the kid has grown up, and it, you know, it just reminds me of the Westboro videos from many years ago, and how a lot of those kids just grew up, and oddly enough, you know, as they became adults, that's when they stopped wanting to make such videos and such content. They wanted to become anonymous adults in the world, and for people not to know their connection to Fred Phelps, who eventually died. And, you know, so it's just so odd, you know, that it's the little boys that, you know, really they could pass for a girl, you know, with their voice and their physical appearance. And obviously that's going to change soon. Just like with Justin Bieber, it eventually changed, just later, about 3 years later than normal. But it's the ones that are the most, like, you would think would be the most innocent, you know, and the most childlike, and have the least to gain, you know, from patriarchy, and how it just basically makes little boys and older ladies pretty much invisible because they don't fit into, you know, this ideal that men need to be like Gaston and Beauty and the Beast, minus or sans the ponytail, and women need to be like a Barbie doll, you know, like caricatures of masculinity and femininity. You know, men have to be burly and strong, and women have to be, you know, submissive and weak and skin and bones, you know. And so little boys don't really fit into that with their high treble voices. And older ladies often don't fit into that, especially if they can't have children anymore. And they're fat, you know, despite not eating like a hog, because they have a low metabolism. So, you know, a lot of times certain people just don't fit into that. But oddly enough, it's often those very people, you know, little bitty boys that shouldn't even be thinking about the gays and all that. And elderly women, you know, that have raised their kids, and they really shouldn't worry about that anymore. You know, it's like, why are they obsessed with the gays? You know, they don't fit into, you know, what a beautiful woman is said to be. You know, and when I hear like old ladies, you know, saying things about gay people, it's like, really, you know, what do they stand to gain, you know, from the patriarchy and lifting up men and saying that women are crap unless they're skin and bones, long haired, blonde, and beautiful. You know, so I just really want to quickly address that video, though he'll probably just start lip syncing to adult men's music, you know, if he ever watches this video, you know, until his voice changes. And then at that point, those kids often rebel, oddly enough, ironically enough, you know, when they finally have the muscle they've been saying men ought to have. It's like they rebel against the church with it. Odd. So yeah, I just wanted to address how ridiculous it is, you know, to say that, like, you know, that gay people want to play with some kids, you know, and that's ridiculous because I'm not exactly gay, you know, I'm just not straight, so to speak. But the last thing I would ever want to do is what they're trying to insinuate, you know, play with some kids. The only kids I want to play with are made out of plastic and on the 1/6 scale. That's the only kind of kids I really want to play with. Not somebody's kid. No interest in other people's kid. In fact, I'm pedophobic, not pedophilic. And, you know, my lack of colds, you know, as in no age from 24 onward with 2 or more colds, and having at least, 27, 30, 33, 34, and 41 thus far, 5 ages in my life go by with 0 colds. You know, that is not the statistics of someone who is promiscuous, sleeping around, and has nothing to do with kids in a typical year. You know, I'm about as far from, you know, that stereotype about the gays as you can get. You know, I've never even been kissed by anyone, and I don't want to. You know, I'm about as non-promiscuous as you can get. You know, they like to say that gays are promiscuous. I mean, let's be honest, they're really only talking about the gay males, you know, male to females, gay men, the ones that actually threaten them, you know, not the ones that actually affect the future, you know, thanks to our ability to have kids or not. And you know, they're only concerned, it's like we're invisible, you know, us lesbian / trans masc / gender non-conforming females, you know, we're basically invisible to such people. You know, they're not singing about how they sing about, you know, Steve, you're a man in a wig. It's usually not. I mean, I guess, you know, there are some references to that. If you're a Susie, you can't be a Scott. Well, you know, ironically, some people actually give their daughters boys' names, so there's that. You know, that's ignorant, because, I mean, you could name your daughter Scott, and although she'd be female, she could have the name Scott. You know, so that's kind of silly, you know, but they're always talking about, like, you know, a man being in a wig, not, you know, a woman with a buzz cut, or a woman trying to use the men's bathroom. You know, we can't let you in the men's bathroom because you're a chick. It's always, you know, we can't let a dude in the girls' bathroom. And, you know, I mean, obviously that's a bigger concern, you know, obviously, you know, they only care, I mean, really and truly the men are the ones obsessed with sports, so, you know, that's why they're always talking about it. But I'm more offended, you know, by the men wanting to use the women's locker room, you know, because that's the real problem. It's not so much that they want to take the stupid trophies. I mean, if, you know, if they wanted to have a trophy, they could just have a stupid, meaningless trophy that just says transgender woman, you know, competes in this sport, and then you could give the first place, you know, to the actual woman that deserved it. You know what I'm saying? The trophy is not, yeah, they could have a participation trophy just for existing, for all I care. The trophies and the sports mean nothing to me. It's, you know, they shouldn't be in the women's locker room, because I don't want, you know, the kind of creepy people I know them to be, you know, to be in the women's locker room and bathroom. You know, that's the bigger issue. It's not the trophies. You know, because, I mean, let's face it, I mean, women's sports were kind of an oxymoron to begin with, you know, kind of like boy dolls. you know, really, I mean, no woman truly cares that much about sports. And we should have quit pretending to care long ago. You know, women should have never gone along with men's pretense that we were as invested in sports as they were. You know what I'm saying? The very thought that there are certain sports in high school that are girls only, you know, I mean, boys only makes perfect sense. You know, only boys playing football makes perfect sense. But only girls playing volleyball makes absolutely no sense, because the people who invented it were men. And some of the best players in history have been men, obviously. You know, so all sports are men's sports. You know, and the idea that there's certain sports, you know, that are feminine, they're roped off for girls. No, I mean, really, women should have never gone along with the pretense of liking sports. And I never did. See, I never could bring myself. You know, just as I couldn't pretend to like my hair long and to like guys, I couldn't pretend to like sports when I was terrible at it and had no interest in it. So, video's gone on way too long, but yeah, Tyson James and Toby James, they just come across as being very ignorant. You know, the thing about the AIDS, you know, that's absolutely not an increased risk for lesbians and trans masculine people. And it just shows a lack of, you know, like basically like we're invisible. You know, the greatest threat to the lesbian or trans mask is invisibility. It is not AIDS. It is not, you know, all these things that the trans feminine or gay men face. You know, really, I mean, I haven't heard of too many gay guys with AIDS. But lesbians are not at an increased risk for AIDS. And we're not promiscuous, or, you know, trans masculine or gender non-conforming females. We're not promiscuous in the slightest. In fact, we're what you'd call frigid. We want to get away. We want to get as far away from sexuality as you can. We don't like it one bit. And, you know, but we're just invisible. It's like you just, right up until the point where you can pass for a male, you know, people just think you might be straight. They just think you're a woman who, for whatever reason, doesn't have long hair. So, video's gone way too long, and I'll go ahead and post it.